host, Solaris Blue Raven. My excellent guest tonight is Robert Sullivan IV. We're discussing his latest book. I was going to say film here, Cinema Symbolism 2. And I'm very, very excited to talk about this book. We have a question for you here, Robert, if you're interested. Let's see here.
Sure.
I think you're back. Okay, yeah. I'm going to make sure you were back for a second.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. And it looks like he's asking if you've done any research on symbolism of the NASA patches.
NASA?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, you'll find the one I have. The biggie of NASA is Apollo 13, which is the son of the Merkaba, the Maasai Jewish Merkaba, being carted across the sky in the solar chariot. This is something I took on in Royal Arch of Enoch. Apollo 13, of course, that's drawing on the 13th degree, the Royal Arch of Enoch, and the whole idea of the sun within Freemasonry. So yeah, one of the big NASA patches that is clearly Masonic. This is something I talk about in Royal Arch of Enoch. I don't get into it in the cinema books, but in Royal Arch of Enoch, the whole NASA thing with Apollo 13, with the Maasai Merkaba solar chariot, the sun being carted across the sky, and of course, this is Apollo. Of course, the lunar missions are, of course, when you're going to the moon, which is the sacred feminine, you name your rockets after Apollo, the sun god, the masculine. It's the unification of the male and female, the Rosicrucian alchemical wedding, and by far and away the most overt Masonic NASA patch or symbol is the Apollo 13 one. I get into it in much more detail in Royal Arch of Enoch, but being Apollo 13, it is using the symbolism of the 13th degree of the Scottish Rite, which is the Royal Arch of Enoch, and the sun plays a critical role in that ritual. In fact, it's through the power of the sun, it's through the sun rays that this subterranean vault, the treasure in the subterranean vault is actually discovered. So the Apollo 13 patch is very critical and is very Masonic, and it relates to high degree Freemasonry, the 13th degree of the Scottish Rite, the Royal Arch of Enoch, or the Royal Arch of Solomon.
Very fascinating. Yeah, I love the way the mythology kind of correlates with a lot of the Masonic teachings, it seems. It's very, very interesting right there. And of course, what about the Nazis? What is their influence over the Masonic teachings, or is there a correlation?
No, none. They tried to eradicate it. The Hitler went after. I mean, with Nazism, a lot of that comes from a lot of the esoteric side of Nazism comes from the work of Madame Blavatsky. But it was corrupted. It wasn't what she was talking about. I mean, Blavatsky was definitely anti-Christian. Her esotericisms were viewed as very anti-Christian. She was very, very critical of Judaism. This was spun by Nazi people such as, I think his name was Rudolf Stein. Jorg Lanz von Liebensfeld was another one. He was a defrocked Cistercian monk. These guys kind of bastardized what Madame Blavatsky was saying, and this was where the justification of an Aryan master race came from. Of course, Blavatsky would have been spinning in her grave had she known that this is what her material was being used for. With Nazism, they did everything they could to eradicate Freemasonry. If you read Mein Kampf by Hitler, I mean, Hitler lays the blames of the world at the doorstep of Freemasonry. So not a big fan of it.
Very, very interesting. But the Masons are definitely connected to our space program, correct?
Oh, sure. You had a lot of high-ranking Freemasons who were in NASA. I mean, just like I said, with the rocket itself, Apollo. I mean, Apollo is the sun god. And what's the symbol of the sacred feminine? The moon. So, I mean, you're sending your masculine rocket to the moon. It's the unification of the male and female. You had Buzz Aldrin, who was a Scottish Rite Mason. He actually took a flag with him. He was the second man on the moon. He took a Masonic flag with him that was crafted by the librarian of the Scottish Rite Temple in Washington, D.C., to the moon and back with him. I mean, you can actually go see this flag in the Scottish Rite Museum in Washington, D.C. So, yeah, I mean, when it comes to NASA, I mean, when it comes to the construction of the United States, it's Masonic from start to finish. So why should NASA be any different? You will find Masonic symbols, in NASA. Like I said, the one that really screams off the page and the one that I really got into is the whole Apollo 13 with the solar chariot that I talk about in Royal Arch of Enoch. And of course, I mean, like I said, just look at the name of the rocket. I mean, it's the Apollo rocket. It's the sun. It's the unification. It's really what the Rosicrucians call the alchemical wedding the unification of the sun and moon, Osiris and Isis. There you have it.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you start looking at the levels of this. And what about Antarctica with Admiral Byrd? And I remember the story of the Masonic flags. They were dropping Masonic flags. Is that correct?
No, I don't know anything about that.
Okay. All right. You might want to look into that
know
sometime.
No, it's okay. No, I don't know that story.
Okay.
But I'd have to look up and see if Admiral Byrd was a Mason. Very possible. I'd have to go look that up for you. I'm not saying he is or he isn't. I'd have to just go look that up. I know right now in Antarctica, there's I've been reading there's some kind of strange things going on. But that's what they are, strange things. I can't verify it or anything like that. As far as Admiral Byrd, did he go to the North Pole or did he go to Antarctica? I'd have to go.
He went to Antarctica. Yeah, he took a whole fleet with him, and supposedly that, from what I understand, they dropped Masonic flags over to their. Yeah,
that wouldn't surprise me. I'd have to go look that up, but that's certainly, if he was a Freemason, that would not surprise me in the least.
It's very interesting. I'll tell you what. Well, they seem to have their hands on everything. I'll tell you what. So what is the connection with the Great Pyramid and the Masons, or initiation with the Masons?
Well, that's really sort of like $1 million question. I mean, we don't know for certain. When you're getting into ancient Egypt, I mean, you will certainly find a lot of Masonic monitors and a lot of Masonic teachings that surround ancient Egypt. Like I said, the whole third degree Masonic ritual is based on the Osirian legend. And you get, anytime you're dealing with sacred architecture and construction and geometry, the pyramids tie into this, and you will have many authors who will say the Masons were behind the building of the pyramids, and then you get into the works of Manly P. Hall, who will tell you that who was a very famous Freemason, who will tell you the pyramids were temples of initiation, possibly coming from Atlantis or some lost civilization. I mean, I can't sit here and tell you for 100% certainty that is the case, of course, but I mean, I'm familiar with all this. I mean, certainly you have the whole idea of, I mean, many Masonic authors, whether it be Martin Clare or James Anderson, talk about ancient Egypt, and the perfection of geometry. And anytime you're talking about that, you're talking about Freemasonry, by default. And like I said, the whole third degree ritual is a retelling of the Osirian legend, the death and resurrection. So yeah, I mean, Egypt definitely plays a hand in this. The whole idea of the pyramid being a temple of initiation. Of course, that's what a Masonic temple is. I mean, James Anderson, who wrote the Constitution of the Masons, will tell you that Masonry was improved by the measurement of the Nile when it flooded. The flooding of the Nile was measuring. The measurement of the Nile when it was flooded improved geometry, so that's Masonic. So yeah, I mean, a lot ties into ancient Egypt, comparative religion, and again, the whole notion of the third degree ritual being a retelling of the Osirian legend. I talk about that in Royal Arch of Enoch, and I think I definitely don't dispute that. I definitely agree with it, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense right there. Excuse me. So what is the purpose behind concealing data? It seems to me like they're putting things in plain sight. In other words, it's hidden in plain sight through certain specific codes that obviously people who have Masonic backgrounds can decode and see what's going on. So what do you think it is that they have to conceal this, but they want you to understand what it is? Do they expect you to do the work and decode it? I'm just asking this question, for the people who are out there who are wondering why everything seems to be written in a code.
Right. It's you will constantly hear this. It's written in a code, but then it's hidden in plain sight. What Masonry kind of teaches is to, I mean, and like I said, I couldn't do this if I hadn't joined a Masonic lodge. Is it sort of teaches you to see things symbolically. They will teach it to you in the lodge, but it's really for me. And like I said, it's individual. There's no like one answer to all this. It's if you go through the Masonic lodge and they'll instruct you in symbolism and they'll give you instruction, but it's really for me, I can only speak from my perspective. It's once I went through the ritual and I went through the high degrees, and then you sit down and you start reading the people like Albert Mackey or Albert Pike or Manly P. Hall. That's when you will start putting this stuff together, and that's when you can start seeing the architecture and these Masons who are all behind this and what they're using and why they're using it. And that is so critical to my research, Solaris. And I've said this on your show. I've said this on other shows. It's context, context, context. Because one symbol and in one context can have another meaning in another context. And this is so true when it comes to the movies. One number or one symbol in one movie can have a completely different meaning in another movie, and you shouldn't apply one to the other. So that's one thing Masonry teaches. It's symbolism, but it's contextual symbolism. It's and when you become well versed in it, believe me, it took me 20 years to put this together. I mean, the Royal Arch of Enoch was a product of 20 years, and like I said, it sort of had this sort of unique side effect for me, was it being able to see it in the movies. But so much of it is context, context, context. That's what I'm constantly stretching. But when you research it and you study it long enough, as I have, you will come to understand why Hermes is always seen around libraries, and why why if you're looking at the Erie Ball Canal ticket, it has the caduceus of Hermes on it, and why the Pythagorean theorem is laid out in Washington D.C., or why the United States Capitol building has a dome on it, or why Pennsylvania, why the street that connects the United States Capitol to the White House is called Pennsylvania Avenue. There are reasons for all that. And they all come out of occult, esoteric Freemasonry, both the Blue Lodge and the High Degrees. And when you study it, and if you're interested in this, please, this was one of my motivations for writing the Royal Arch of Enoch and these movie books, was I wanted to create a compendium where, it was a one-read book where, I really felt like, with Royal Arch of Enoch, I was trying to make that, I modeled that book after Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma and Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings. I really wanted that to be sort of like the one book that if you're going to read one book on Freemasonry, that was going to be it. And same thing with the movie books, now there's two of them, of course, but I really wanted to make it sort of like the gold standard book when it came to Masonic symbolism. Now, of course, in Royal Arch, do I talk about everything Freemasonry? No. You couldn't do that in one book. That would be an impossible task. Same thing with the movies. Could I cover every movie in one book? Of course not. Be an impossible task. But I really wanted the Royal Arch of Enoch and these movie books to sort of be the gold standard when it came to like Masonic symbolism, movie symbolism. And like I said, what was so important to me, Solaris, was the context, putting it in the context. Because, and this is so true when it comes to the movie symbolism, a symbol in one movie may have esoteric meaning, but that same symbol in another movie, it may have esoteric meaning, but it may have a different meaning or being used for a different purpose. So this is very critical. And like I said, one of my clear motivators in writing these books.
Yeah, I can understand that. And once again, I do encourage everybody to read your work because it's phenomenal, excellent, well written, and very detail oriented. Let me ask you something about DC. It seems to me like the architecture itself obviously is all Masonic. It's strategically done to some level insofar as, in my opinion, creating a force field or something that enhances or amplifies. Would that be correct analogy or description, or no?
Yeah, maybe. Again, it's definitely Masonic. You have a ton of Masonic symbolism and architecture going on, astral alignments, the above and below of Hermes Trismegistus going on in Washington, D.C. I tend to agree with you. I think it's powerful. I think it definitely draws on the subconscious. I think it's noticeable. I think it's no different than walking into a church with sacred architecture, sacred geometry. I think you get that same effect in Washington, D.C. So, I don't know if it's like generating a force field or anything like that, but I definitely think it's generating, I think it's powerful. And and it's definitely Freemasonic, and it's definitely designed to leave an impression. What that impression is could be, you kind of categorize on an individual basis. But you have the whole, the building with the Apollonian, the solar dome on it, the obelisk, the sacred geometry, the alignments. It definitely is powerful. And I don't disagree with you that it definitely, let's say, leaves an impression. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to call it alchemical to some degree almost. It's just, a lot of thought goes into that. A lot of thought, a lot of energy.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it alchemical. Alchemical, it's funny you mentioned that word to me. That's very a dominant theme in cinema symbolism too. But it's very Masonic. It's very esoteric. And it is there. I have a whole chapter in Royal Arch of Enoch called, Washington, D.C., the city of the sun. I get into a lot of the sacred architecture, the Masonic architecture. If you're interested in the subject matter, please check out Royal Arch of Enoch. I get into this with the template of Baltimore, Maryland. You'll find it there. You'll find it with the Erie Canal. You'll find it with the Union College aerial template. When you have the eye for it and you're getting into the building of this nation, you will find that all these guys were turning to Freemasonry to construct this nation. I think that's pretty irrefutable at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. Yeah. And for the alchemical description, now let's get back to cinema symbolism too. So give me some examples
Hello?
type of things that are happening with that, with your film?
You dropped out there for a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I was talking about the cinema symbolism too. And what are some descriptions of the alchemical exchange that you saw in the films?
Yeah, alchemy, in movies, and what I would describe as an alchemical movie, this runs parallel with Gnostic movies. This is something I've really reckoned with, really struggled with, because they parallel each other, yet they're a little different. A Gnostic movie is where a person is like obtaining enlightenment, is becoming wiser, but ultimately is the same person. I mean, I think of like Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz. She goes on this magic adventure. She gains gnosis. She learns that there's no place like home. She comes home. She's sort of changed, but she's wiser, but she's still the same person. She's still the same country girl she was when she went away. And she's wiser. Now, some people will call that alchemical. I kind of shy away from it. I say it's more Gnostic than alchemical. Now, again, I understand this is splitting hairs here. For me, an alchemical movie is where the character or the protagonist or a character starts as one thing and winds up as something else at the end of the movie, has gone through a change, and is something else at the end of the movie. So an alchemical transition in a movie would clearly be, for example, the two that just come to mind for me would be Jack Torrance in The Shining. He starts off as a failed writer, as a struggling father, and through an alchemical transition is a psychopath by the end of the movie, an axe-wielding murderer. Another one that would come to mind is Nina Sayers in Black Swan. She starts off as this sort of sexually repressed ballerina, and by the end of the movie, she has performed alchemy and is this now sort of weird black swan creature, confident yet sort of demonic and diabolical and sultry. She's completely changed. So that to me is like, would be examples of alchemical transition. When a director wants to imply alchemical transition, and this is critical to understanding this. This is sort of, we're getting into a little complicated material, but I don't mind talking about it. This ties into Renaissance alchemy. This is something that is really critical to understanding this. I talk about this in cinema symbolism too. So if you're interested in alchemical film, or movies with alchemical themes, Cinema Symbolism 2 is the book for you. There are 4 stages of symbolic alchemy. The blackening, which is known as the nigredo, the whitening, which is known as the albedo, which ties into the moon, the yellowing, which is titled citrinatus or citrinitis, that is the yellowing sun, and then of course the alchemical completion, the magnum opus, which is the rubedo or the red, or the reddening. If you have the eye for it and you're symbolically trained, you'll actually find these colors turning up in film quite literally, actually on the screen or personified on a person or in some symbolic form. So like, for example, in The Shining, you have the masculine, the yellow, the citrinatus, which is Jack Torrance. And of course, he drives the yellow Volkswagen, the sun. And the road that he's driving on at the beginning of the movie is actually called the Going to the Sun Road. So we have the solar alchemical. Then we have the sacred feminine, which is Wendy. She's the moon. She's the wife. And then, of course, you have the rubedo. The magnum opus is complete at the end. So you have the red being poured down the halls of the elevators, with the elevators opening up. Those colors are literally being used to convey alchemical transition. Aronofsky pulls the same trick in Black Swan. It's a very interesting study. And if you're interested in alchemical cinema and alchemical transition in movie, please check out Cinema Symbolism 2. I would say to you, read the books in order, but Cinema Symbolism 2 really breaks down alchemical movies. It's a fascinating study. And when you have when you're trained symbolically, you'll really be able to pick up on these color schemes and how these directors are manipulating these color schemes to convey alchemical transition in film. It's one of the most fascinating studies I've ever done. If you, like I said, please check out Cinema Symbolism 2. I have a whole explanation of alchemical movies and how to spot it, and how and when these colors turn up in film. It's really an interesting study.
That's fascinating. You know what? It reminds me of detective work. You're almost like a detective. You make a good decoder for these crazy serial killers. I bet you they use something similar with their programming.
Yeah, I mean, it's when it comes to like I said, decoding these movies or breaking it down, Solaris. One of the things that is really critical to me, and is so important to my research, and is really something I pride myself on, is contextual meaning. I mean, so many times, if I'm reading even books by Masonic authors, they'll take something and they'll take it out of context. I mean, you will find this again. I mean, I can't tell you how many, videos I've seen, talking about like the Great Seal of the United States and how, the pyramid and, this is evil and this is the Illuminati. This stuff has all deep esoteric meaning to it, but it is not evil. And again, it has to do with the contextual meaning that this symbolism is being used in. When you understand the context of what it is being done in, you understand that it is not evil. Now, it can be evil and it can be used for evil purposes, but again, it's so important for me in my research to break this down on a contextual level, whether it be movies or Freemasonry. And like I said, this is one of the things that I really pride myself with my 3 books. So with whether it be Freemasonry, Masonic symbolism, the movie books, the movie symbolism, the one thing that I really pride myself on is breaking this stuff down on an esoteric level, but on the correct contextual basis. And that really is years of training. When I sit there and I'm watching a movie, it's, what kind of movie is this? Is this a secret society movie? Is this a Masonic ritual? Am I dealing with archetypes? If so, what type? Am I dealing with numerology? Am I dealing with the Campbell monomyth? All this is critical to this research and doing this work properly. And like I said, this is one of the things that I really pride myself on when I write my books, is putting this material forward in the correct contextual basis.
Yeah, it's definitely, you're very methodical is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But yeah. It definitely, what's really interesting, you mentioned The Shining. I didn't realize he had a yellow Volkswagen. I didn't even notice that.
Right. I mean, well, you're gonna have solar and I mean, you have a lot going on with alchemy in that movie. I'm trying to think off the top of my head here. I get into this in much more detail with the book, but you have these 4 color stages. You have the red, which is the magnum opus is complete. That's at the end of the movie. I mean, you have you have the sun, the yellowing, which is which turns up. You have the albedo is Wendy. She's the moon, and she shines through in the darkness. The whole movie is set in wintertime, and even the ghosts tell him, well, you've underestimated your wife. She's more cleverer than you thought she was. That and again, this is the lunar symbolism, the light of the moon shining through in the darkness when Jack Torrance is locked up. You have the yellowing. You have the yellow Volkswagen. He's driving on the going to the sun road. He drinks the alcohol in the golden room of the hotel. Danny wears the Apollo sweater, as the sun god Apollo. So, and then the Grado, the blackening, the hotel, the darkness. When it comes to breaking these movies down on an alchemical basis, and that's in itself, is it alchemical? Is there a character here going through a transition? So if there is, then it is an alchemical movie. And once that diagnosis is made, then it's then these color schemes will literally scream off the screen at you. And you will know why the color red is turning up here and there. You will know when Nina Sayers is in Black Swan is going through this alchemical transition, and the alchemical transition is complete. She's dancing in the nightclub and the red lights are flashing. That's because the alchemical transition is over, and she's now about to turn into this black swan creature. Same thing with Jack Torrance. The red blood is being poured out of the elevator because the alchemical transition is complete. He's now the psychopath. So when it comes to diagnosing an alchemical film, for the methodology, for me, it's the first thing is there a character undergoing a transition? And if the answer is yes, then it's breaking these movies down with these. Then I know that these color schemes are going to turn up because all these directors use it, and it literally screams off the page at you when you know what you're looking for.
Wow, it's fascinating. Listen to you talk. I swear, when you talk about the blood and the alchemical transition, that's very, very interesting to me because I can look at this and correlate it to not only films but actually crazy people acting out. People like, for example, serial killers, when they murder somebody, they're committing some sort of a ritual where there's an alchemical transition going on with the blood sacrifice.
I suppose so. I suppose that's one way of looking at it. I just do it in the context of a film
Right.
with, right. I mean, I guess that's one way of looking at it. Usually, alchemy is a positive thing. In movies, it
Hmm.
generally is not. When you're dealing with Renaissance alchemy, I mean, the whole idea was you're turning base metal into gold. Of course, this is symbolic. The base metal is ignorance. The gold is wisdom. So the study of alchemy is the perfection of self. You're going from ignorance to wisdom. But again, I guess with a serial killer and a psychological breakdown, I suppose that is a form of alchemy in one form or fashion, I suppose.
It's just interesting when I start looking at everything. It's just fascinating information. I swear, it's just really nice to have you on tonight and discussing this. And once again, the best way to purchase your books is through your website, which I encourage everybody to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. RobertWSullivanIV.com. Royal Arch of Enoch is out in print and in ebook. Cinema Symbolism is out in print and ebook. Cinema Symbolism 2 is print form only right now. The ebooks are about 2 to 3 weeks away. But yeah, just go to, it's www. It's my name. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. Just go to my website. It's www.robertwsullivanIV.com. RobertWSullivanIV.com, all lowercase, all connected. Links there to buy the books. You can buy it on, like I said, they're on all the online distributors, Amazon.com, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. If you're listening overseas right now, you can get it off of like Amazon UK or Amazon Canada or Amazon Australia. I know the books are like in Australia, they're on a site called Booktopia. So yeah, just go to my website. There's a link there that says Buy Robert's Books. You just click on that. Like I said, the ebooks. Hang on, let me just go there right now. 1 second. Yeah, I mean, and the ebooks are also available on sites such as, I've gotten emails from people who said, hey, I don't use Kindle, I don't use Nook. Do you have the EPUB version for sale? I mean, I know you can get that at places like eBook Mall or in Terra. But certainly, obviously, the Kindle is probably the most popular. So it's on Amazon Kindle, it's on Barnes and Noble Nook. Just go to my website, robertwsullivaniv.com. Links there to buy the books, links there, more information about me, my biography. Links there. I have an events and appearance page with which we talked about, upcoming radio shows and appearances that I'm going to be on. I have 5 shows booked for May right now. Definitely check that out. Links there to follow me on social media, Twitter, Facebook fan pages. I have a YouTube channel, where I've filmed videos and a lot of radio. Go to my YouTube channel. You click playlist. Tons of old radio shows I've done. Talking about all this stuff. All that content is 100% free. So yeah, it's a very easy site to navigate. RobertWSullivanIV.com. Check it out. Check out the books. And again, thank you, Solaris, for having me on tonight.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I've been on your show tons of times. So anything you want to ask me, whether it be this or hyperspace, and like I said, as my books come out, I'll certainly, you're one of my favorite shows. So definitely look forward to coming out, with more cinema symbolism. And when A Pact with the Devil's out, we'll do this all over again. Anytime.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. Well, like I said, it's an honor to have you on, Robert, because you're so intelligent and I really enjoy your information. I'll tell you what, you're fantastic. So feelings mutual there. You're one of my favorite people to interview. There's no doubt about it. So let me ask you, I'm kind of relaying questions that I know are common that people ask me that I don't have the answer to. So I figure I'd pass it on to you. Like, for example, what is Skull and Bones insofar as the number 322?
Well, I'm somewhat reluctant to talk about this. Skull and Bones
Okay.
is, well, here's the reason why. That's one of those ones where there's probably a meaning to it, but you probably are going to get the meaning to join it, and I haven't joined it. So I've heard people, I've heard people make reference that it's a reference to the vernal equinox, March 22nd, 322. I know there is some verse in there. I know if you join it, it has a meaning, and they do explain it to you during the ritual. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is. I've never. You have to be a student at Yale University to join Skull and Bones. I never studied at Yale, so I'm not a member of it. I'm a little familiar with the rituals of it. It's obvious. It's not attached to Freemasonry proper, but it is certainly Masonic-like. But it's definitely an interesting secret society. You got a lot of power players coming out of Skull and Bones. The guy who founded it, William Huntington Russell, toured Germany, toured Europe, and he clearly came in contact with Masonic lodges that were holdovers of either the Bavarian Illuminati, or were still perfecting rites or performing rituals based on something known as the rite of strict observance. This is another obscure Masonic high degree paradigm coming out of Europe. And he clearly must have been taken with this, because Skull and Bones clearly reflects these Masonic Illuminati rite of strict observance rituals, no doubt about it. So he must have come into lodges in the 18th century, the 19th century, that still were holdovers of the old Bavarian Illuminati or the rite of strict observance, the Jesuit Freemasonry, high degree Freemasonry, the rite of perfection, rite of strict observance. And he brought this back to America and created Skull and Bones. You're more accurately to call this thing the Russell Trust. That's really the better name for it. But yeah, it's a secret society at Yale University. I mentioned it, I believe, in passing in all my books in some form or fashion. I wish I could give you more on it. Like I said, I haven't joined it.
That's okay. I just thought I'd ask
but
you
it's
about
interesting. It's like I said, I mentioned it. It definitely turns up, I want to say, in all three of my books in some form or fashion. Off the top of my head, I just can't recall it right now. How it does, but I know I talk about Skull and Bones in Royal Arch of Enoch and the movie books. So like I said, it is important and it's worthy of talking about. I wish I could give you more of a definitive answer on it.
Well, that's okay. I'm just curious,
Yeah, I know. In their ritual, they get more into what the 322 means. Off the top of my head right now, I just can't recall what it was. But yeah, Skull and Bones is definitely interesting, no question about it.
Yeah, it is. Well, I know it's like a seven in numerology, which is a spiritual initiate number right there. So
yeah.
Interesting there on that level. But yeah, I'm always interested in, I have that in my bloodline too, where it's mysticism. I'm very much into mysticism. So I try to look at things as a very positive versus the negative. There's a lot of fear out there, and there's a lot of people who insinuate a lot of things because they're not part of the inner circle. And I think that's the biggest harmful thing they can do. They assume people are doing these insidious things, and perhaps that's not the case. I'm not saying that with this particular group, but do you know what I mean? For example, for some of the Masonic teachings. So I see that a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of people, and again, this was one of my reasons for writing the book was to kind of, I don't see a lot of this as negative, and a lot of people see the movie Symbolism as negative or mind control or this or that. I don't at all. I think the incorporation, like I said, the incorporation of the symbolism in these movies is akin to like Freemasonry, an architect incorporating sacred geometry into a building. I mean, it was never designed to be evil. This architecture in DC was never designed to be evil. I mean, this is all Christian Kabbalah. This all comes out of Christian mysticism. And the whole idea of aligning a building to a star system or a planet. The whole idea behind that is that the stars and the planets are closer to deity than we were. So by doing this, you're drawing divinity, you're drawing the God down into into your building. None of this, I mean, and the same thing with the movies. I never looked at this as like evil or mind control or anything like this. I thought it was sublime. I mean, I view it as a challenge. I love breaking these movies down on an esoteric basis, assuming there is, symbolism there. I mean, I've watched many a movie. I point that out also. That's also critical to this. Not all movies contain this. I've watched many a movie. I mean, you take the works of like Quentin Tarantino with Reservoir Dogs, one of my favorite movies. It's a great movie. It has a couple archetypes in it, but I mean, there's no real esoteric imagery in that. Same thing with Pulp Fiction. I mean, it's a great movie, but really no esoteric imagery. So not all movies are doing this. That doesn't necessarily make them a bad film, but I mean, when Darren Aronofsky is putting an alchemical theme in Black Swan, or you have the Overlook Hotel, for example, which has this vicious reincarnation cycle going on inside of it. So in order to convey that vicious reincarnation cycle, Kubrick uses repetition to convey this to your subconscious mind. I mean, I think it's fascinating. I don't view it as evil at all. I think it makes the movie sublime, in my opinion. But again, that's just my opinion. So
it was a great film.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I guess you could spin it any way you want to. But like when I watch The Shining and this is like an interesting study, when he repeats things in The Shining, I don't view it as evil. I think he's conveying the repetition, this vicious reincarnation cycle that's going on inside the Overlook Hotel. And I don't view it as evil, but, I suppose if you want to, you can.
Right. Well, what about room 237? What is the significance with that one? I forgot about that.
Well, one of the things that Kubrick, he changed the room number.
Okay.
He changed the room number. I think it's 213 in the book. And some people have claimed that the change to the room number of 237, that this is a reference that Kubrick's filmed the phony moon landing. That they may have gone to the moon, but the number of 237 is a reference to the distance of the moon to the Earth, which was 237,000 miles in 1979. And of course, Danny stands up with the Apollo 11 sweater on, goes to 237, and this somehow means that Kubrick, that they actually went to the moon in 1969, but they couldn't film there, and Kubrick was the one who filmed them jumping around. That this was a soundstage, jumping around in the astronaut outfits, and that Kubrick was the one, behind that. That's one take on it. I don't know if I buy into that. But certainly if you add, this is what Kubrick does. He likes to repeat things. So if you multiply 237, if you multiply 3 times 7, you get the number 21. You times it times 2, you get the number 42. The number 42 repeats all over the place in The Shining. The boy is wearing the number 42 on his sweatshirt at the beginning of the movie. Danny Torrance, when Scatman Crothers is driving back in the car, to the Overlook, he has the number 42 on his license plate. The movie that Wendy and Danny are watching in the Overlook is The Summer of 42. So what he's doing is he's repeating this to convey this vicious reincarnation going on inside the Overlook. Now, if you add up the number 237, you get the number 12. Well, where does the number 12 repeat? For example, the hotel is KDK 12. When Scatman Crothers is going through the inventory, the pantry, there are 12 turkeys. There are 24 pork roasts. 24 is 12 times 2. There are 12-pound bags of sugar. There are 12 jugs of black molasses. The hotel is KDK 12. Jack Torrance throws the ball against the wall 12 times. Wendy and Danny take 12 turns in the hedge maze. Jack hits the door 12 times with the axe. So this repetition,
you are something.
Well, this is all. The two reincarnation guys, the two guys that Jack claims to be the reincarnation of, Delbert Grady and Charles Grady. The name Charles Grady has 12 letters in it. The name Delbert Grady has 12 letters in it. What Kubrick is doing is he is blasting your subconscious mind with the number 12 to reinforce this vicious reincarnation cycle. This repetition is going over and over and over and over again inside the Overlook. So this is one of the techniques he uses in The Shining to convey, to bombard your subconscious mind with this reincarnation going on inside the Overlook Hotel. I think this is fascinating. I don't think it's evil at all. I think it's sublime the way these directors can use this. And what I like that Kubrick does is he just does this in The Shining because it's about reincarnation. It's about recycling. You go to a movie like Eyes Wide Shut, he doesn't use this technique at all. He uses techniques, but he uses different techniques because Eyes Wide Shut is not about reincarnation. So that's really craftsmanship. That's the mark of a great filmmaker. And like I said, I don't view any of this as malignant at all. I think it's sublime. I think it's fascinating, and I think it's challenging when to try to find this stuff. And like I said, I know I was on with you on another show. I think it was the last time I was on with you. It takes many a viewing of a movie to pick up on this material. I'm sure. It's not something you see it once and okay, there it is. You got to watch these movies over and over again to pick up on this stuff. And
counting the bags of sugar and everything. My goodness.
Well, pay attention to when Scatman Crothers is going over the inventory with her.
Wow.
Again, this is sort of what he likes to do in this movie is and the other thing he does to convey this reincarnation is he presents everything in doubles. There are the two little girls, and then after they're introduced, you see the two twin adult girls leaving, and he says goodbye. Allman says goodbye, girls, to them, and it's the two twins leaving. And then, of course, you have Scatman Crothers presenting this overwhelming, copious, inventory of food at the Overlook. And of course, this is dualistically opposed to when Jack and Wendy and Danny are driving to the hotel. They're talking about starvation. They're talking about the Donner Party starving to death. So you will constantly find this dualistic interplay of light versus dark, starvation versus food going on inside the Overlook to convey this repetition, this light versus dark, this endless dualism going on inside the hotel. Things are repeating. I mean, characters say lines back to each other. The little girls tell Danny, the two twin girls, they say, "Stay with us in the hotel forever and ever," or something to that. "You'll be with us forever and ever." Then about 10 minutes later, Jack Torrance is sitting on the bed with Danny. He says, "We'll stay here forever and ever." So they repeat things back to each other. The movie takes place every other day. It's like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Saturday. It's every other day. It's every second day. The number 12, there are 2 times thrown on. If you watch The Shining, there are 2 times put up on the screen. I believe it's 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Add 8 plus 4, and you get the number 12 again. That's done intentionally. So, it's repetition, it's dualism. If you're interested in The Shining, please read Cinema Symbolism 2. I have a whole section on it in the horror movie portion of the book. And it's a fascinating study, the repetition and all the symbolism going on inside that. One of the other ones that is in there is if you what's the phrase, "all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy." If you actually add up the letters in that phrase, you have 33 letters. And if you add up the spaces in between each word, you have 9. Add 33 plus 9, and you get the number 42 again. So that's another repetition going on inside The Shining. It's fascinating. It's fascinating the length that Kubrick went to put all this in there, to really blast your subconscious mind with this repetition.
You know what's interesting, Robert? I don't know if anybody else has figured this out, but you. I really don't. I mean, I know people put little pieces together, but you have it down.
Well, like I said, this is one of the things that I pride myself on with the books, is you're going to find stuff in these books that you're not going to find anywhere else. I have researched this. I have, I try to footnote my books. I have a vast bibliography in my books, but I really tried to consolidate a lot. With Royal Arch of Enoch, with Cinema Symbolism and Cinema Symbolism 2, I really tried to consolidate a ton of information in those books. We won't have time to get into this, but I know the one thing that's in my book that you won't find anywhere else is we're talking about The Shining. We won't have time to get into this, but there was a movie that came out about a year and a half ago, and I like the movie. It's called Crimson Peak, and there is an entire study going on with a comparative study with Crimson Peak and The Shining. That is so overwhelming and so uncanny. I couldn't even get into it with you right now. But I know that Cinema Symbolism 2 is the only book that you will find this in. I know that for a fact. So, and again, like with Royal Arch of Enoch, I mean, I know because I've looked that, the whole occult interpretation of the template of Union College of Schenectady of New York, my book is the only place you will find that. The architecture of Baltimore, Maryland parallels DC. I think my book is the only place you will find that. And again, with the whole alchemical storylines with Black Swan and The Shining, I'm pretty sure my book's the only one you will find that in. So, I use other people's work. I mean, I have a vast bibliography pages I have to look at this, other people's work, but I really tried to consolidate a lot of, material in all my books and been presented in the correct contextual basis, is how it's being presented. And like I said, it's a deep study. I mean, Royal Arch of Enoch took me 20 years to put it together. Wow. And then the movie books, they came they were born out of that. So it's really been for me like a 25-year journey doing all this.
It's excellent material, and I encourage everybody to take a read. I love the idea that we have excellent, intelligent beings like you on the planet that are here to contribute such wonderful information. And I do want to thank you for doing this, Robert, because I'm a big book nerd. I mean, I love books, I love libraries, and to have people put this kind of information out as a resource and just for a very interesting kind of correlation of what's going on different levels. It's fascinating. It's so cool.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I was really excited to do it. I mean, it's exciting for me as well to present this material and talk about this and talk about, like I said, when I did Royal Arch, I mean, excuse me, when I did Royal Arch, the Royal Arch of Enoch was the first book to present this historical anomaly about how this high degree ritual was incorporating components of the Book of Enoch prior to its discovery in the West. And this was fascinating. I was happy to talk about this, and I mean I was excited about it, and same thing. I'm enthusiastic about it with the the cinema books, and with all my books. I'm always enthusiastic about putting this out there and talking about it, and I enjoy doing it. So I'm really happy with the way the books came out, and I'm glad people are reading them, and like I said, we're just tipping the iceberg here. If you're interested in what I'm talking about, definitely check out the books. And like I said, they're all out right now. The only one that's kind of missing is the ebook of Symbolism 2, but that will be out most likely. I mean, it should be out in about 2 to 3 weeks. So it's funny because right now it seems to be the print copies are selling more than the ebooks, and that wasn't the case like 2 years ago. I definitely sold more ebooks than I did of the print copies. Now it seems the print copies seem to be more back in vogue.
Good.
Not sure why that is, but the Royal Arch, and like I said, let me just reinstate this again. I back over the fall of last year, in the fall of 2016, I founded my own publishing house. My books are put out by my own company called Deadwood Publishing. So if you're buying Royal Arch, Symbolism 2, make sure it's a Deadwood copy. These are revised. For Royal Arch and Symbolism, these are revised, re-edited editions. They are better than the first editions. Symbolism 2, again, this is Deadwood Publishing. Definitely, make sure you get the Deadwood Publishing. Those are the best versions of my books. And like I said, the print copies and the ebooks are out of Royal Arch and Symbolism. Print copy of CS2 is out, but not the ebook yet. But people seem to be buying the print copy anyway. So who knows?
That's great. Well, I love print copies. I like hard copies myself. I'm not real big on reading books online, so.
It's 50-50. I have people who love, I've talked to friends of mine who love the print copy and will have nothing else. I have buddies of mine who love the ebooks and just love having all that information at their fingertips on their computer or on their mobile device, and just say they're cheaper, they're easier to read, and just won't go. I've had people tell me they've gutted their library and have just replaced them with the ebooks because they love them so much. So I've heard both ends of the spectrum. I probably am like you. I probably like the print edition more, but I know the ebooks are very popular, and of course, obviously, they're more economical. There's no paper or ink involved or anything, and they're instantaneous. There's no shipping cost. You just buy it, and basically, you start reading it. I know friends of mine who love the print edition, and some love the Kindle. And like I said, my books are out in all the forms. The only one that is like 2 to 3 weeks away is the CS2 ebook that will be coming out. Make no mistake, but you can get the print edition now.
Excellent, wonderful information right there. We'll move on from The Shining here, but I just want to say one thing. I didn't realize it was about reincarnation. I thought it was about possession.
Well, you don't know, that's another, who is this guy? Is he being possessed by this, reincarnated spirit of one of these two guys? I mean, the whole thing at the end presents this massive conundrum of, who is he? I mean, is he Delbert Grady? Is he Charles Grady? Is he neither of these? When you see that photo at the end from 1921 or whatever it is. So, right. If you want to go the route that, he's being possessed. Well, he's being possessed by some sort of, it's an older spirit that's, reincarnating in the modern world. So it's all about repetition and, this reincarnation. I mean, what does he tell him when he gets there, that the guy, killed his family with an axe? Well, that's what he's trying to repeat that again. So the whole movie is about, repetition and reincarnation, and, and this is what Kubrick does. He just, reincarnates this whole thing. He uses repetition to sort of, transfer this cycle that's going on, whether it be possession or reincarnation inside the Overlook.
Mm-hmm. It makes so much sense right there. It's one of these things where after we listen to you and read the book, we're going to have to look at all these films again.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think when you read the book, you'll sort of definitely see the movie in a different way. I could still watch movies for entertainment value. I mean, I can kind of turn this off, but it's funny because when I watch a movie, some movies I don't see it in, some movies I do, and I can't help but notice this stuff anymore. And when these people are putting these little esoteric homages in or whatever, I noticed it right away. I mean, just for example, I don't know, there was a show that was on A&E called Bates Motel. I don't know if you ever watched this or not. It was about Psycho. They kind of reinvented Psycho. And I was a big fan of the show. It just wrapped up. It was on for 5 years. They just ended it. They just ended it last week. But in the 5th season that was just aired, the Norman Bates character, the season started by playing a record. And the record was called the record label was Plainfield Record, and Plainfield Record is of course a record to Plainville, Wisconsin, which was where a serial killer named Ed Gein was from, which was where Norman Bates is based upon. Wow. So I thought that was interesting. That's a little homage. I can't help notice this stuff anymore. And then they had a scene where they were in an office building, and the name of the company was like R.A. Block. Was the name of the company, and that's of course a reference to Robert Bloch, who wrote the original Psycho. So I see this stuff now all the time. I've become whenever I watch a movie or a TV show, this kind of stuff, I've kind of become sensitive to it, I suppose, like a psychic would be. I know I can spot it all but immediately now. Like I said, but I've been doing it for 25 years, so I do have some experience with it.
Well, you're a professional on this. There's no doubt about it with decoding the information. We're almost out of time here, plus or minus. I think we have about 5 minutes. But I wanted to ask you, and I know we're going to probably run out of time, but I know on Hyperspace, we touched a little bit about some of the actors they pick in alignment with perhaps their zodiac sign, or there's some kind of correlation with that as well?
Yeah, it's not their zodiac. It's this is a fascinating study. This is what I talk about this in cinema symbolism. I noticed this for the first time with the Matrix Reloaded movie. And this is what I call this occult casting. And this is where a filmmaker will use an actor or an actress to convey some sort of cultural valiance to the viewer for some reason. I first noticed this here. We won't have time. We're running out of time. And this is a deep study. I first noticed this with the Matrix Reloaded movie, where they were using an actor named Anthony Zerbe when Keanu Reeves and the cast of and the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar got to Zion. They met with this councilman, I forget his name, but he was played by Anthony Zerbe. And there's a scene in the Matrix Reloaded. And if you're familiar with the Matrix movies, they are very Gnostic. These movies are all about Gnosticism. And of course, one of the, themes what we talked about earlier is dualism, light versus dark, good versus evil. And there's a scene where Keanu Reeves, Neo, is talking to Anthony Zerbe, and Zerbe's talking about how mankind has to be preserved and how Zion is the last bastion and the last hope for mankind. And I remember watching, I'm like, I've heard this before. I've seen this before. Where have I seen it? Sure enough, this is a reinvention. This is a they're using Zerbe. They are drawing from his appearance in a movie called The Omega Man, where Zerbe played a character named Matthias. And he gives this exact same speech in The Omega Man, only he reverses it. He's talking in The Omega Man about how Charlton Heston's hideout is the last bastion of mankind, how it's evil, how it has to be destroyed, and how we have to get in there and destroy Charlton Heston, who was the last man alive, how we have to get into his hideout and destroy him. Well, they cast, the Wachowskis cast Zerbe as this chancellor in the Matrix for this dualistic purpose to sort of re-give the speech, only now he's giving it for the benefit of mankind. And again, it's dualism. It's the opposite reason. And again, this ties into this Gnostic theme that's going on inside the whole Matrix trilogy. So it's the whole idea of these movie makers using actors and actresses to draw on this cultural. It goes much further than typecasting. They're drawing upon these cultural valences that these actresses and actresses bring to movies. It's a very deep study. Some examples, we don't have time. I know we're running out of time. Max von Sydow at the beginning of Star Wars: The Force Awakens is an example of this. Robert Loggia and Bill Paxton, Bill Pullman in David Lynch's Lost Highway is another example of this. I'm trying to think of another one. It's a deep study. There's others. It's fascinating. Oh, Patrick Swayze in Donnie Darko is another example of this. And it's how these filmmakers are using these actors to convey these cultural valences for these very esoteric reasons to the viewer. So it's not only movie symbolism, It's actually the actors can convey, their actual appearances can convey an occult meaning. And it's fascinating. And I know we're running out of time, but I talk about this in both my books, in both cinema books.
Very good. Excuse me. And we just are we're just about out of time here. Thank you, Robert. I have to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been incredible to have you on. And of course, I look forward to having you back, and best of luck with your new book. And once again, give everybody a rundown how to get your book and how to contact you if they choose to.
Yeah, thank you, Solaris, for having me on the Witching Hour. It's much appreciated. I thought it was a tremendous show. Thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to doing this again in the future. Anytime you want to have me on, just shoot me an email. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here. So anytime you want to have me on for any of your shows, just let me know. The best way to find me and buy my books is just go to my website. My website is my name. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is Robert W. Sullivan with 2 L's, the letter I, the letter V for the fourth, the Roman numeral, IV for the fourth.com, robertwsullivan.iv.com. Links to buy my books. You can get the print edition. You can get the ebooks. I have an events and appearance page, which is routinely updated. Check that out. That's for my radio shows, any book signing, any live appearances I'm going to be at. Like I said, radio shows, podcasts, TV shows. Check out events and appearances. There's a link to buy my books. There's a link to my social media, Twitter, robertwsullivan.iv.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. We're out of time. Excuse me. Thank you, Robin, for joining us. Robert, excuse me. It's been wonderful to have you on tonight. Everybody stay tuned for Shining Side Out with David Dungeon and Becky. Coming up next, to sail you on tonight from the Down Under. We're going to have an excellent show. I think they were talking about the quantum mind last week. We'll see what they're talking about this week. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you again, Robert. It's been a pleasure.